Dean Skirka, president of Bitbuy, and the gentleman to my left needs no introduction at all, Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, who's been thankfully enough given us some time today out of his busy schedule to join and give us some insight and provide an overview on the crypto industry as he sees it, and then to answer some of your burning questions on where we go next and whether or not Shiba Inu is the coin of the future. So I'll turn it over to Kevin, and just really to set the stage. I mean, there's been a lot of advancement in the crypto industry in the last few months. I mean, the last few years in general, but things have not slowed down. More recently, we saw BlackRock make a large investment into USDC, which I think is a big signal to the industry overall. We've seen a lot of advancements on the US side as it relates to regulations. And, more recently, we've seen WonderFi announce today another acquisition of a registered platform in Canada, which will likely speak to sort of the WonderFi approach and how we're looking at regulation and regulated platforms in general. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Kevin. And Kevin, this is really just for you to just give us an overview as you see it, some of the stuff that you're seeing in the market that's getting you excited and sort of where you see us going, over the next 6 to 12 months and beyond with this exciting industry that we're all in.
Well, I look at it very simply, and I've said this many times before, but I'll reiterate it again. I don't consider Bitcoin to be a coin at all. Bitcoin is software. Solana software, Polygon software, Avalanche software. These are software projects. And in the long run, if you believe that this productivity, primarily aimed at financial services, that's what it really is, which is the largest sector globally, is going to bring value, then you have to think about crypto as being the 12th sector of the S&P one day, which is the way I look at it. And so my decision as an investor is to get involved now before it becomes regulated, because my long-term belief is that when it does get regulated, and I'm talking primarily about the US market, there's going to be an inflow, a very large inflow of institutional capital into all of these assets. Now, you can't know with certainty who the winners are going to be. And that's why you need a diversified portfolio. So I've got a very large selection of different projects in my portfolio, about 32 of them. So different tokens, coins, equities of software companies like WonderFi, like Bitbuy, like Coinberry. And to me, that's all the infrastructure. I mean, you've got to have compliant platforms if you're ever going to let this be something that the everyday person can use. And so today, in the announcement of the expansion of the number of users in the WonderFi platform, with Coinberry, that's very important because it puts us in a premier position in Canada for customer acquisition, customer service, features, and all of the things we can do well as we do it on a compliant basis. And so the way I look at it is you can play two different ways. You can go rogue, and that's a lot of fun, and you might make money. Or you can do it in a compliant way that fits within the banking system, which is what I would prefer, because I think longer term, there's more value there. So WonderFi, Coinberry, Bitbuy, these are all compliant platforms, regulated, and we operate under an order from the government. So I consider that a much safer way to play ball, and in the long run, a great investment.
That's great. Thank you, Kevin. That's super valuable. I mean, let's just maybe talk a bit about some of the past and how you came around to really embracing this industry and technology. I think a lot of people here would remember some of the early days when you were quite a critic of the space in general. And, I think it's it's everybody here today knows that you've come around full circle. So maybe could we just talk a bit about the journey that brought you here today? And, I know you touch on your view of crypto as software, which I think is really helpful for people, especially early on, to get a grasp on things. But maybe just talk about the journey from what got you from critic to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm every day I'm trying to put capital to work. I'm an investor, so I'm always trying to find the path of least resistance to make good investments. And in the 2016, 2017 timeframe when I made those comments, the regulator, particularly in the US and in Canada for that matter at that time, was extremely non-constructive, if that's the best way to say it. They really, really didn't want people like myself who were highly regulated, because I have so many investments in traditional financial services companies that were issuing securities and that kind of thing, that it was made clear to me by my own compliance department that this was not something I should do. And I made those comments in the light of how frustrating that was, because I always felt there was tremendous potential, but couldn't participate. And then all of a sudden we started to see the regulatory environment change. And that started actually in Canada. In so many ways, Canada leads with that order that you actually got, Dean. Think about it. You were one of the first to get a dealer broker license with, crypto exchange attached to it and regulated under the OSC or OSC order, which is amazing. And that just shows you one of the first in the world to get that. And that's when I started getting interesting, because I thought, all right, if the regulator's on board, I can go back to my compliance people and my auditors and say, look, I'd like to participate in this in a traditional way with diversification, many different positions. And it's been a very good outcome. And I think, yes, there's volatility. There's no question about it, but it doesn't mean that there isn't long-term value. It's a nascent industry. It's just starting out. And my path is to choose to work with regulators, to work with governments, to cooperate with them and build a business from the ground up. And I'm certainly an advocate for that, very entrepreneurial. And so when the market changes and the information changes, I change, because I'm, at the end of the day, an investor. And this is a very important sector. And I'm very, very happy to be part of it, very proud to be part of it.
Well, that's great. And I know the industry is super thankful to have you as an advocate now. You're doing a lot of good work in promoting a lot of what this technology promises to achieve. Let's talk about Bitcoin for a second. I know, that's sort of the entryway for many people. And I know for a lot of our audience, the first asset they'll look to when they join our platform. And I know you've been a big advocate of ESG efforts within Bitcoin. Where do you see Bitcoin going with regulation and maybe with some of these ESG initiatives in mind in the long term?
Well, ESG didn't matter till about 4 months ago. And now it really matters, and I'll walk you through this. So if you look at the good news, and let's start with the investment premise. The reason you should own some Bitcoin, in my view, and I'm not telling people what to do, I'm telling you what I'm doing, is that I believe at some point Bitcoin will be regulated. And when that happens, it'll get an allocation in sovereign wealth and pension plans of maybe 0.5% to 1%, maybe up to 3%. That would be a traditional mandate. But if you're running a $100 billion mandate, which is a small sovereign fund, that's a lot of money. And so I would like to have a position in Bitcoin prior to that happening, because I think that's what's going to give it much more stability and price appreciation over time. No different than gold, digital asset, if you want to look at it that way. And everybody has their own opinion about what their weighting should be on Bitcoin, but that's my opinion. Now, the ESG issue, for most institutions who are not permitted to buy Bitcoin, the way they got exposure to the value of Bitcoin was to buy the shares of public miners. And there's some great companies out there. Hut 8 is one, Hive, Marathon, Riot, and many others. And so they're publicly trading, and you could just buy a basket of those shares, and you would see those stock prices they mirror the price of Bitcoin. If Bitcoin doubles, the stock price doubles, et cetera. It goes down, they go down. And that was just fine, except all of those miners use carbon offsets to claim carbon neutrality. Now, in the last few months, the SEC put out a memo saying that they're going to require carbon audits from all public companies that claim neutrality, including Bitcoin miners and every other company that's public. So if you claim that you're carbon neutral because you're buying offsets, you need an auditor to sign that. Now, everybody knows that carbon offsets are BS, for lack of a better word. You're doing something that is generating carbon, and you buy an acre of the Amazon rainforest and you claim you're carbon neutral. There's no way to audit that, and no auditor will sign it. So that's no longer an option for institutions. And I sold my shares in all those companies, not because they're not great companies, just that I don't want to be involved in the debate around carbon offset audits. And so the new model that is emerging is sovereign wealth funds investing in hydro and nuclear power data facilities, where they mine their coin and they keep it on the balance sheet. I'm a shareholder in a company called BitZero that's private. Its largest shareholders are out of the United Arab Emirates. That's the new model. They call it the Norwegian model. So Bitcoin mining will actually be a good thing, because it'll be done with hydroelectricity, wind, solar, and nuclear power. And all of the other sources of electricity will fall out of favor because you can't survive a carbon audit. And that's okay. I mean, look, it's just one of those things that happens. Nobody saw it coming, but Bitcoin will be fine. The attack by the European Union on proof of work 3 weeks ago, they were trying to ban Bitcoin mining with that edict. It failed. And because there's a lot of innovation that happens in Bitcoin mining, it's a lot of development of better technologies, better computing power, less use of energy, more development of hydro turbines. All of that's coming. That's all good. And that's why the European Union struck that down. But that shows you the risk here. Even the POTUS order talked about climate change, and that was a direct swipe at Bitcoin mining done the traditional way. So all of that's going to change, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You bring up a really good point in terms of the institutional appetite today around regulation and ESG efforts really not being where it will be in the future. With that in mind, if you had an institutional cap on today, how do you think they're approaching it in terms of getting into the space today? Is it mostly educational, or are you seeing institutions actually take positions in certain projects or assets today?
I gave a keynote just a couple of weeks ago at Bitcoin 2022 on the Wednesday, which was institutional day. There was 1,500 institutions participating, and they own zero crypto, nothing. Now, for them to take the time to fly in from all over the world to listen to speakers talk about this means they're very interested, and they anticipate that policy is coming. And I would also argue that there was a lot of that signal there. For example, Senator Cynthia Lummis, who put forward a 600-page bill, was the keynote on the Friday to the Bitcoin 2022 conference. And she talked about how she is pushing for policy on crypto. In addition to that, we saw the Toomey and the Haggerty bills that specifically talk about stable coins. That's another group of initiatives. So all of this policy is coming all at the same time, which signals to institutions that it's time to start understanding this asset class. But I think what will happen first is, if we're going to get policy, it's probably going to be around something very conservative, like a stable coin, like a USDC or another stable coin, which would allow institutions to use it and stake it or lend it and try and get a 4 or 5% interest rate on it, which they can't do with cash right now. And as a payment system, it's far superior to anything else out there, much faster, more transparent, certainly auditable through the chain. And so a lot of good things happening there. But again, it's all policy and it's all software innovation, and it'll come at the pace it comes. But I'm making investments across all of these places.
Great. Maybe now focusing on Canada a bit more. As I mentioned earlier, WonderFi announced this morning that they'll be acquiring Coinberry, which was the first licensed brokerage, similar to how Bitbuy was the first licensed marketplace in Canada. Maybe just quickly talk about the strategy in Canada, and I know this, but maybe for the audience, why you're focusing on the regulated platforms in Canada and what WonderFi is trying to build around those.
Well, my interest in being a shareholder in WonderFi was that the management there, of which you're a member, had a very clear vision of what the strategy was. And I boil it down to 2 words: compliant crypto. I can't afford to be a crypto cowboy. I do not want to work outside of the regulatory regime ever, because I have too many assets that are regulated now and a very large portfolio of more traditional financial services companies that are highly regulated, and we do not have the option to be offside. I'm also regulated internally by a compliance department and an external auditor. And it's very clear to me my path has to be on a compliant basis. But I also think the real long-term value is to provide compliant platforms to this nascent industry. So the reason I'm an investor in WonderFi is it was clear to me when they came on the scene, they said 2 things that really interested me. First, they wanted to be compliant on a decentralized wallet and also on a centralized wallet, which is a great option, because if you're going to the trouble of acquiring a customer and paying to acquire that customer, and I've learned as I've explored more and more into crypto that I need both. I need a decentralized wallet where I want to hold my NFTs, and I want a centralized wallet for my major coin positions that I can have an account in and monitor it and have a little more security. Even though I don't have direct ownership of that coin, it's okay with me, because if I'm going to take big weightings in Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana, maybe a couple of others, I want that in a centralized wallet. But with WonderFi, I get both, but they're compliant. So the whole structure there gives me a tax, for example, tax reporting. I need that. I have to report to my own auditors. I need compliance, and I don't want to be offside. And that's what WonderFi is. It's compliant crypto. So I would argue for investors, if you want to own the infrastructure of the Canadian compliant crypto market, you do that through equity ownership of WonderFi. If you want to actually own direct positions, you can do it within WonderFi, either open a centralized wallet through either Coinberry or Bitbuy, which are available now to you, or also a decentralized wallet on WonderFi itself. You get all options. And over time, I'm sure the management will make it easier and easier and easier to make the onboarding. And that's the opportunity. It is now by far the largest in Canada. WonderFi has more accounts than anybody else. It's going to be very hard to catch up with them. The only way that anybody could catch up on a compliant basis would be if the management of WonderFi and its teams don't execute, and I'm betting they will. So I'm pretty happy in my position, and I think we're growing the business this way. As a shareholder, I say keep going.
That's great, thank you. Let's get to some of the pre-submitted questions now, if you don't mind, Kevin, and it's quite timely because I see in the chat somebody is talking about getting HBAR on Bitbuy, and I know you might have a thing or two to say on that. So let's just jump right into it. Everyone wants to know what Kevin O'Leary is holding in his basket of cryptocurrency portfolios. So, you know, within the context of what you can share or can't, why don't we just jump right into it and give us some of your, you know, your top holdings and some of the coins you're maybe looking at as an interest.
I take a view that I'm looking for long-term economic value. So on some of the more speculative coins, which are lots of fun, I don't really hold much of those, with the exception of Potherium, because I'm involved in the cat DNA business, and Potherium gives a portion of proceeds to cat shelters. So that's my fun, crazy chicken coin. But it's not, it's one that I'm just supportive of that industry. There's 110 million cats in North America, and I provide DNA services for them. So that's the reason I own that one. But the rest of the coins are more in the traditional flavor of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Polygon, Serum, Avalanche, HBAR. These are some of the positions I've got. You know, Helium, if I didn't mention that one already. I mean, these things are projects that have economic long-term value to me. In addition, I own the equities, obviously, of WonderFi, Immutable Holdings, which owns NFT.com. It's also publicly traded in Canada. And I'm a private shareholder along with shareholders in the United Arab Emirates in BitZero that is mining my coin for me on an ethical and green basis with no carbon audits because it's all hydro and nuclear power. So, you know, at the end of the day, I'm trying to take positions here that are very, very diverse and wait and see what happens. I'm very fortunate because a lot of these development teams, I'm able to meet with them personally. I met with the Polygon team, Sandeep in Dubai, and I really liked what he was doing in aggregating transactions and putting them through Ethereum in one transaction instead of hundreds of thousands. It's really reduces gas fees. There's economic value there. But I don't know who's going to win. I'm also a shareholder in FTX and a paid spokesperson for them. So there's that. Big user of USDC. So I have a lot of different positions, and I manage them like a portfolio. I try and have diversity, and I keep an eye on what's happening. I try and stay au courant. But certainly for me, the most interesting right now is what's going on in Canada, most advanced regulator in the world. And Canada has an opportunity to lead the world in how we're building out this compliant crypto platform in WonderFi, Coinberry, Bitbuy. I think it's just terrific.
Absolutely. I think Canada's really set the stage for the rest of the world in terms of regulating crypto asset platforms and how they can operate in a safe and compliant manner. And it's great to see WonderFi acquire another one of those assets. One thing I did not hear much of in that was reference to NFTs or metaverse. Are those something you have a view on yet? Are they too early in the life cycle? How do you think about some of the newer emerging technology within sort of the global cryptocurrency industry?
NFTs have to go through some kind of regulatory decision, because if an NFT has a utility to it, in other words, if I buy this NFT, I get 2 tickets to the Formula One race here in Miami on May 8th, or I get a smart contract and interest payment if I do an NFT off my watch and it trades in the aftermarket, that certainly smells like a security to me. And, you know, when you buy securities for income or for utility, they're regulated through prospectus and, you know, Reg A and whatever else you're using. It's not exciting for me to get involved in NFTs that are providing utility and then find out later I'm offside with regulators. So I've avoided that. I don't have a problem buying NFT as art, and I have done some of that. Regarding the metaverse, you've got 2 big debates going on. The economics of how that's going to work. Is it going to be advertising and transaction fees? Probably both. Obviously, that world is going to be generated first by gaming, and I think there's some opportunities there. Then there's the big debate about a metaverse that's curated for big brands like a Nike or Johnson & Johnson. They would probably buy space from a curated metaverse where they can advertise knowing that their storefront is not set up beside a porn shop. And then there's the unregulated metaverse, which could be far more Wild West, and you don't know how that model is going to work out yet. I think there's merit for both. Here in Miami, I saw a rather interesting development, 2 giant condo towers being sold all on the metaverse with unique opportunities to go tour your facility and even take a shower. It was remarkable how high detail there was in that metaverse, and let you look at your unit, the pool facilities, the restaurants in it, even though they haven't broken ground. A multi-million-dollar project, but it's sold out. So there you have it. The metaverse has use case that makes economic sense.
Great, thank you for that additional insight. Let's bring it back to Canada for a second. You know, Canada's been a bit of a leader here with the regulatory framework in place around crypto trading platforms. You've obviously spoke to the importance of that from your personal investment thesis or perspective. In terms of where you see this going globally, do you see Canada's framework being a leader for other markets? Do you see other markets prioritizing crypto the same way Canada did? Is this a 2 to 3 year game, a 3 to 5 year game, a 10-year game? How do you see regulation sort of unifying globally around crypto, and you know whether or not it unifies under the same framework or not? How long do you see this process taking?
I think it's going to take 3 years. I would say the Canadian order is a really good one in terms of getting countries up and running. And I certainly know that other countries like the UAE and Brazil and Peru and other Nordic countries are looking at the Canadian model and saying, well, that seems to be working. And so the way that kind of works to understand what is being proposed by these regulators is, let's start with a compliant dealer broker mandate attached to an exchange so you can actually trade these securities. But let's limit which coins are there initially so that we can have some control over it. Primarily it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, and maybe a few others that are slowly granted. So far, there's not a lot of staking or lending in that model yet, but I think that's to come, particularly around stable coins. When we get some policy on that, maybe USDC and others, that would be great because it provides income for people that are desperately looking for it that they can't get in savings accounts. But I also see with these compliant platforms a lot more intriguing opportunity to work with traditional banks to provide for people that have accounts, traditional accounts in banks or where they have a brokerage account and they would like to own some Bitcoins or some Ethereum, to do it on a compliant way that services like Bitbuy, like Coinberry, like WonderFi can provide those relationships with traditional banks. And the only way that's going to happen, and that not just in Canada, but in other countries, if it's done on a compliant basis, back to that theme of compliant crypto, because no bank is going to go offshore and be non-compliant. That's just not going to happen. And so that's really why I'm an investor in WonderFi. I see it as an onboarding ramp for banks eventually. It's still early days, but this consolidation that's occurring by necessity, you see WonderFi acquire or go into a deal to acquire Coinberry. It's because it makes economic sense for all the shareholders involved. The customer acquisition costs drop for WonderFi, the service level goes up, the number of accounts increases, the assets under management also increase, and the company becomes larger, more scalable, and it provides better services and products to its customers. That's what happens in a consolidation, and I'd be surprised if it's not I wouldn't be surprised if there's more consolidation in the Canadian crypto market. It just has to happen. It just makes economic sense, and hopefully WonderFi will be participating all the way up.
I think what we'll do now is push to some live questions. And I know some audience members are just pushing them live in the chat, but if you can just focus them to the Q&A, that'll allow us to sort of gather all of them and make sure we get to as many as we can. Look, let's just get to the elephant in the room here. A lot of people in the chat asking us about XRP, and we're no strangers to the coin. And, it was unfortunate, but we had to fit within the regulatory framework here and, delist the asset while things unfold with the project. But one of the questions we got was, assuming the SEC drama goes well, what is your view on XRP, and sort of how do you see this process playing out, and maybe what precedent does it set for, other cryptocurrency coins out there?
XRP has to clean up its act with the regulator, and that has to get completely resolved. It's also on the no-fly zone list in many other jurisdictions, if you want to call it that. We cannot afford to put that on any platform that we have that's regulated for obvious reasons. And it's up for that project to get out of the penalty box it's in. And I have no problem once they clear the regulatory hurdle and everything is clean. But I want to point something out. You know, if you look at the Toomey bill or the Haggerty bill, they call for a clean audit every 30 days. And they also call for no assets that have a duration of more than 12 months. But it's the clear audit every 30 days that everybody's going to have to comply by on these types of tokens and coins. And so you have to be able to show that whatever you're saying your assets that are backing it up, you got to be able to do that. And, you know, that's why you have, you know, players that are less controversial like USDC providing that, even though that's not regulated yet either. But that's how they were able to convince Fidelity and BlackRock to put up $400 million, I assume. That's a huge investment. So, you know, XRP, it'd be great after it's cleaned up its act. After the regulator and the OSC says it's okay, then it's okay for us. But we do not go rogue. We are not crypto cowboys.
No, absolutely. Yep. No, I think, you know, it's just good to address it because there's a lot of people in the audience that seemingly have a soft spot in their heart for XRP. Let's move forward. This is a good question here. If you were a new entrant to the space starting tomorrow, how would you go about looking at the various cryptos and what go-to resources would you lean on?
I would do two things. I would start with no more than $1,000 and I would open up a decentralized wallet and a centralized one on Coinberry or on Bitbuy and start to deploy that capital. Move 500 into each and learn how these platforms work. Educate yourself. You don't need to go past maybe 2 or 3 positions, maybe a little Bitcoin, a little Ethereum, maybe a little Solana, a little Polygon. That is plenty of exposure to watch the volatility, understand how it works, learn what gas fees are, see the difference between the direct ownership of a decentralized wallet on WonderFi and a centralized wallet on Coinberry or on Bitbuy, and just start to understand that. Now, whether you make money or not in the beginning doesn't matter. It's understanding how these platforms work and getting used to trading. That's what I did. I did that 2.5 years ago, and I became very proficient at it by just learning. And it's a very interesting space, but you start small. The key is to open that account and fund it. You transfer some dollars, and then you upload it, and you learn how to buy and hold these positions on a centralized and decentralized platform.
Yeah, I completely agree. When I have friends or colleagues ask me how to get started, I just tell them transfer money to Bitbuy and just start the process. You'll just find yourself learning more about the coin you purchase, about the industry more broadly. And then, you know, as Kevin is an example, you can go quickly down the rabbit hole and become a proponent for this industry. Moving on, Kevin, this is more about a WonderFi, but do you think WonderFi will list on the NASDAQ in 2022?
You know, I can't tell at what pace things get listed. I mean, it makes sense to broaden the base of shareholders. I've always believed, and when I take large positions in companies, I do it because I'm an advocate for the management. I'm an advocate for their vision. I'm an advocate for the sector. And I think to the extent that the management can tell their story so that new shareholders, I mean, I'd like to see WonderFi listed in many different countries because I think it's going to be a global platform. That's why I invested in it long term. But at any one time, in any one regulator, you just don't know. I think the key is to continue doing what it's doing. Acquiring great companies, building the platform, reducing customer acquisition fees, providing new tokens and coins and new services to its customers. And long term, that will resolve itself. You know, I think you have to have a plan. I mean, nothing happens overnight. It's just not possible. But this idea of compliant crypto is very, very attractive to institutional investors. And so it lets them resolve a lot of problems in terms of what they can do. And I think when you buy WonderFi shares, regardless of what exchange they're on, you are buying the infrastructure of the internet. It's the same analogy as, you know, the gold rush hundreds of years ago. You want to own the companies that make the picks and shovels and jeans, the clothing that people wear. You want the infrastructure because you're agnostic to the price of any token or coin. It doesn't matter if Bitcoin goes up or down in terms of the outcome for what happens with WonderFi. What matters is it provides the infrastructure so that those who want to own it can own it on a compliant basis. That's the investment thesis. So I'm hopeful it'll find its way onto multiple exchanges all around the world over time.
Absolutely. I really like the picks and shovels analogy. I really think that's what we're building here at WonderFi. It's a good question here from Oz. What do you think can derail Bitcoin or blockchain technology more broadly? What are some of the larger risks to the long-term viability of this asset class?
The regulator, and I think you've got some encouragement there. The POTUS order, the President of the United States' order, said we're not going to make this illegal. We're going to regulate it, and we want to study it because I understand the productivity enhanced there. There's so much to be done with payment systems, so much opportunity, so much value created that I think now it's up for the regulators to regulate. And different countries are at different stages of this, but I think it's very important to understand the opportunity and pursue it this way. You're in a nascent industry, you're in the first inning, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't be inquisitive about it. And that's certainly what's going on with WonderFi. And I'm a big advocate for this because I see the value here. And I really think that the idea that it's going to be regulated out of existence, that is not on the table anymore. It's the pace of regulation that matters. There'll still be volatility. The reason Bitcoin is so volatile is that there's no institutions owning it yet, but that will change over time. And that's the bet you're making when you invest in it today. You have to stomach the volatility, but long-term, when institutions can own it, it'll stabilize at hopefully a much higher price.
Absolutely. I guess on that theme, moving into sort of the banking industry, how do you see the banking industry fitting in this ecosystem? Do you see a world where TD will inevitably offer Bitcoin or Ethereum to purchase? You know, if so, over what horizon? Where do you see the big banks fitting into this whole equation?
I don't think they're going to move quickly, and that's okay, nor should they, because their Canadian banks are legendary for how conservative they are and how successful they are. The Canadian banking system, if not the best on earth, is one of the best on earth and the envy of many countries. And so they're going to do it on a compliant basis. Certainly when it comes time for them to explore the opportunity for their clients to own Bitcoin, Ethereum, and maybe some stable coin, maybe 2 or 3 different coins, I know whose door they're going to be knocking on. Probably ours, because we have built a compliant platform. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the platforms themselves. After all, WonderFi is just software too. It's going to be very hard. It's Bitbuy software and Coinberry software. It's all software, and a lot of money and time has been built into those platforms to make them compliant with all the tax reporting and everything else that has to be done. I'm looking forward to those partnerships one day. I'm certainly going to stay in touch with banking leadership. I'm fortunate to know many of them, and I do talk to them occasionally. They're just not ready yet. But what'll drive them to this eventuality is their clients. Their clients. There are many, 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 many people who bank at Canadian banks that would like to put 1 or 2% into cryptocurrencies, and when they keep knocking on that door, we'll be here to open it.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I'm just trying to get through. I see a question here. Does Bitbuy have a centralized or decentralized wallet? Maybe you just want to touch on sort of the structure of WonderFi and how we're able to offer both.
Yeah, Bitbuy does not. It's a centralized wallet. That's okay, but it's part of the WonderFi ecosphere, and we offer decentralized wallets. So obviously, what my expectation is of management is that they will make it as easy as possible to onboard and own both centralized and decentralized wallet if you wish, and explore those. I personally am keeping my NFTs in my decentralized wallet. That's where I like them. And I'm keeping my coin in a centralized wallet. And that's sort of the way I want to do it. But anybody can do anything they want on the DeFi platform. WonderFi provides both through its ownership and its amalgamation with soon Coinberry and Bitbuy. These all matter. It's a very interesting way to look at it. And you should understand that these both have merit long term in the crypto universe.
Yep, absolutely. I think for WonderFi, having the ability to offer both is a huge competitive advantage for the company. Let's shift gears a bit. Everyone's talking about inflation, interest rates. It's all over the news. How do you see both or either impacting the crypto markets in the short term? And is there anything people should be considering as they're watching news on inflation or interest rates in terms of direct correlation to the crypto markets?
So the biggest opportunity right now, if you don't want the volatility of something like Ethereum or Bitcoin, is to own a stable coin like USDC and lend it out for 30 to 90 days at 4 to 5%, which is kind of keeping at least pace with inflation. But we can't do that yet because the regulator hasn't regulated on that lending policy in Canada. It is available to institutions in the US. So I'm hopeful that we will be able to do that shortly. And maybe, Dean, you could give us an update. I'm sure you're having that discussion with regulators now.
Yep. Sorry, just was speaking to the source. What was that, Kevin?
Asking you what you think about how long it'll take before you can allow for the lending of a stable coin on Bitbuy.
Yeah, I think it's something we're looking at quite strongly, and sort of as we've alluded to throughout, Bitbuy is one of the first regulated marketplaces in Canada, has to ensure complete compliance with that order. And so what we're working with the regulators on now is really the educational process of USDC, how stablecoins work, how yield on those assets work, with a view to offering those to our clients as quickly as possible, because we obviously understand the importance of yield within the broader cryptocurrency ecosystem. Just have to ensure that it's done within the regulatory framework in which we operate. And I know, Kevin, I know you have an interest with USDC, and in many ways it was sort of your first introduction into the cryptocurrency industry when you were looking for a place to park your money. I don't know if you want to share any bit about that, or just sort of if that was sort of the entry point for you at the start.
Yes, I have a corporate account in my holding company with Circle in the US, and I do stake coin. We are limited by how much we can hold through our compliance department because it hasn't been regulated yet. So it's treated like an equity. So it really can't be more than 5% weighting in any one mandate. But I think that's going to change over time. Clearly, the bell has rung with that BlackRock Fidelity investment. We've mentioned it earlier in the show. That is huge for Circle. It's a huge endorsement. 400 million is a serious chunk of change. And for Fidelity and BlackRock, which are incredibly regulated and conservative companies, this signals, I think, a new era in stablecoin. And so I would think that the Haggerty or Toomey bill will advance faster as a result. And we'll see what happens. But clearly, if anybody's going to offer it in Canada, it's going to be our platform. And as soon as it's available, we will. And I'm talking about the lending component, so that you would take your Canadian dollar, transfer it into USDC, and then loan that coin out and get prevailing interest rates, which are currently around 4 to 5%.
That's something we'll be looking to offer as soon as we can in a safe and compliant manner. We're getting a lot of inbounds on Shiba Inu and Dogecoin. We won't spend too much time on meme coins, but do you have a general view on meme coins, meme stocks? Do you think they play a part in the broader economy, or is it just noise? Maybe you'll just go quickly on your views there.
I don't think it's noise. It's entertainment. When I go to Las Vegas, I take a set amount of money and I assume that I'm not going to come home with it, and I'm buying entertainment. And if I do come home with it, that's just bonus. But the point is, these coins have no intrinsic economic value other than they're speculative. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with gaming and speculation. It's just part of what we do as a society. So no, I don't have a position in either of those coins. I said earlier, my speculative position is around cat shelters and Pautherium, which I think is such a crazy name. I just love that. But it's really not a financial investment. It's a speculation. And so I don't use Dogecoin or anything else in a portfolio, because I don't know what it'll be worth in 24 months, let alone a longer period, because there's no economic value there.
No, absolutely. It definitely shows the importance a community can play, though, within a stock or crypto asset. Certainly, the rallies in those really show that the communities can get behind them in a big way. Moving along here, is there anything you'd like to address, Kevin? Now that we have a second, or?
No, I think you covered a lot of material today. I mean, this has been pretty good, very informative. Obviously, it's a big day for WonderFi, and the company will continue to grow. That's good. But providing new products and services is definitely on our mandate, and that's how we remain competitive and keep our dominant market share.
Yep, absolutely. Maybe we'll just quickly touch on Coinberry, seeing as it is news of the day, on WonderFi's acquisition of Coinberry, Canada's first regulated brokerage. In terms of the evaluation of that asset, in terms of making the decision to acquire it, maybe just touch on a bit about what you saw from them and Bitbuy as well in terms of making those decisions selecting those assets to acquire?
Well, I mean, obviously, I don't make these decisions as an investor. I can certainly have an opinion on them, but I'm glad that the management. My whole thing is when I heard the vision of this company, over 2 years ago now, or maybe just under 2 years ago, it was always about doing and scaling and doing it on a creative basis. And once I hear that, that's music to my ears, and that's certainly what's been going on. I don't negotiate any of these deals. I just support management's vision. And that's when I become a strategic investor in a company like WonderFi, I'm doing it because I agree on their investment philosophy. But this is another example of what I've made an assumption as just that any investor has to make a decision. There is no question that in the Canadian market, there are too many independent broker dealers and exchanges. It's just not possible for that to remain. This is an industry of scale. You don't need 15 exchanges. You need very liquid, large scale compliant exchanges. And so you can see it maybe boils down to 1, 2, or maximum, maybe 3. And that's really what's going on here. And you can see it happening. It's no surprise it's happening. The ability to stay small as an exchange, I think, doesn't exist. I think long-term, that's a really bad outcome. And it does put in place, and this is not just the exchange industry, when you're in a nascent form, in the very early, you have many, 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 many players. But then that game of musical chairs starts, and companies like WonderFi start coming in and consolidating. You don't want to be the last person listening to the music when an industry is consolidating, because your value diminishes pretty quickly. For a while it increases, and then all of a sudden it starts to decrease. It's how you get that timing right. And I'm not sending out a warning to other companies. I'm just saying this is how it works. And so you're starting to see this happen in Canada. It's going to happen all around the world, and each country is going to have a very large regulated exchange that provides spot pricing and liquidity and transparency on crypto assets that are compliant. And I think that WonderFi's way down that path right now. And I would think for other companies, going to be very hard to catch up.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Let's end with one last question here. Thank you, Kevin, for answering all these and taking the time. Can BTC ever become a reserve currency? And do you see that as its primary use case going forward?
That's a very difficult question. It can become a reserve currency, but not the reserve currency. I think what happens is the largest economies on earth always end up being the reserve currency because they command most of the trade. And so if the US regulates a stable coin backed by the US dollar, that will be the first reserve currency because it'll be used as a payment system. And I think there's a lot of use case for that. Doesn't take Bitcoin out of the game, but I don't really consider Bitcoin a currency. Everybody has an opinion. I consider it a hard asset. The halving's coming soon. The rarity and the cost of mining will go up. And for those of us that put economic value on what Bitcoin is, I think it appreciates in value. And I don't want to trade my coin. I want to own them for the long term. And so I need something else to use as a payment system. And I'm not the only person who thinks this way. So for a payment system to become ubiquitous or reserve currency, it has to be a payment system. I see that around a stable coin other than Bitcoin, although there's a use case for both.
Absolutely. All right, well, we'll end it there. Kevin, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate this insight. As always, you have a pulse on the market, and we're really happy that we have the opportunity to share that with our users on BitBuy today. Thank you, everyone, for submitting questions and your time. Follow BitBuy and WonderFi on Twitter for more questions and more opportunities coming up. We will have 10 lucky winners from this Q&A session that will receive co-branded merchandise. So be on the lookout for emails shortly after if you are the lucky winner. Other than that, we hope everyone has a great day. Feel free to message BitBuy through its social channels or WonderFi through its social channels if you have any further questions or comments. And once again, just like to thank Kevin O'Leary for his time today. This was very, very educational and much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Take care.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.